doors and the posts hast thou set up thy remembrance, for thou hast discovered thyself to another than me, and art gone up. Thou hast enlarged thy bed, made thee a covenant with them. Good morning, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6, verse 37. Last verse we'd covered was 36, where he had said, be merciful as your Father also is merciful. For he is kind, well, in the previous, because he is kind to the unjust and the unthankful. Then it goes on in the next verse, continuing along the same line of general reasoning. Let's read it. Judge not, and ye shall not be judged. Condemn not, and ye shall not be condemned. Forgive, and ye shall be forgiven. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down and shaken together, and running over, shall be given to your bosom. And, okay, first of all, judge not, and ye shall not be judged. I take these the same way I take the things we were talking about last week, where he talked about, giving everything away, giving to people who ask, lend, expecting nothing in return. Because generally people lend only in that one way. But what it says is, a man who loves his son may lend to him, give him a loan that he never expects to get paid back. Or another family member. Maybe a nephew, a niece, cousin. So you might lend them money and say, when they can't pay you back, say, forget about it. Right? You might. Some people don't. Some people are not particularly kind even to their own families. But he's talking about loving people who are not necessarily the people you would be expected to love. As you could get a reputation as a very kind person, only looking after your family. But that's the same. But whether you're godly or ungodly, that's the same general behavior of all men. They tend to favor their own. And he kind of concluded with that at some point where he said, this is what the ungodly and sinners, sinners lend to sinners and receive as much again. So he's saying, rise above what other people are doing, what's expected, and do more. Be better. Be less attached to the world in many ways, as far as and I don't think it's so much about attachment. Those passages are not so much about your attachment to your goods, but more about your willingness, to whom you will suddenly be less attached to them over. I mean, we are not so attached to our goods. You know what I mean? Like, you loan to a loved one, and then you say, oh, forget about it. And you think, okay, that makes sense, maybe. But then when it's someone else, all of a sudden it's like, my money, my money. When your life is at stake, it's understandable. It's like I always speak in terms of these things with money when you have an excess. You can't very well give away everything you have when, for example, I have children I need to provide for. If I don't have excess of that, then I don't have anything. I need excess of that to start worrying about this stuff. In some ways, it's good because it's like I've never had really excess. I guess when I first got married, I had more money than I realized. Yeah, I mean, Like, I didn't realize how far you could make money go until I was stretched. And a lot of times people will say I've got no money, but really it's like, they've just, they're just not really managing it well. But it's not just money, it's really everything we give of ourselves. It's like our time, our care. So then it says, judge not, you shall not be judged. Condemn not. Again, same thing is that people are not always so judgmental, are they? Not of themselves. They judge others, but not themselves. They're not so judgmental about themselves. Well, I had a very good reason for doing that. It's not a question of, you got to understand, Jesus is not saying there's no such thing as judgment, or God isn't going to judge anybody, or that sin is not sin. Like, for example, if someone comes up to me and says, I killed a man, I'm not judging him to say, well, that's a sin. I'm not judging him, or that's terrible, or whatever. I'm not judging him. That's like an established judgment. Like, we know that's wrong. So one of the first things that's important to remember, because people always this is like the hedonistic unbeliever's favorite verse, judge not. They do whatever they want, and they tell you, don't judge me. But when people do things that are just known to be sinful, you're not judging them if you state the obvious that it's a sin. Now, that doesn't mean you should necessarily go around being a busybody in other people's business, sticking your nose in where it's not wanted, like going down to the local bar or something and telling everyone they're a sinner who's there, is not the approach, And the thing is, a lot of people know they're sinning. They know what they do is either wrong or destructive. They either know it's morally wrong or personally destructive. And there may be a third thing, but I didn't think of it. Or, morally wrong usually includes things like hurting other people. They know it's wrong. So when it says judge not, I generally reserve that for matters where we have to come into judgment, or where we need to judge it. And is he saying you should never judge? No, he's not. What he's saying is judge not, and you will not be judged. Meaning, the business of judgment is serious business. People, way too often, are so quick to judge others, but not themselves. Themselves, they let off the hook. Now, I know a lot of people, actually, who are the other way. Who, and maybe this is just, I'm in the company of rare people. I don't know. But, like, they have a tendency to judge themselves very harshly and let other people off the hook. But not in everything, But I see that tendency in some people. Sometimes it's not so much people so much as times, right? Sometimes we're very hard on ourselves and very light on everyone else. And sometimes we're very light on ourselves as we judge the world around us. And what he's saying is, when you're unequal, the judgment you judge, he doesn't say it here, but it's written elsewhere, like in Matthew, that when you Matthew chapter 7, that the judgment you judge other people with is how you're going to be judged. Meaning, you don't get to be harsh in your judgment towards other people and then light on yourself and think that God's not going to notice the difference. You know what I mean? If we're harsh in our judgment of others, we can expect no less from God. Because, when God judges us, he does take into account our state of mind, our conscience. He takes it into account. Well, how hard were they on people that did the same things or comparable things? How hard were they on other sinners with similar problems? Like, I don't talk about it much anymore, but it's a important issue because it's very common to people. When I first became part of Spirit of Truth Church years ago, when I received the Holy Spirit, I've mentioned at times past that I went around talking about how I'd had a problem with masturbation. And there were people there who would feign disgust and like acting all weird about it, right? And it turned out later on those people had the same problem, but they were just, their way of shielding themselves from their own guilt was to shame me and make it seem like I had a special problem that no one else ever had. You know what I mean? No one else ever had this problem. Just you. Not me. Oh, no. As he's sitting on top of a, little treasury of dirty magazines in his closet or something. But I saw that, and that was an instance where I realized, it's like that's the kind of thing. People will judge others harshly, but they themselves do the same things. And what they're doing is they're contributing to a general climate of condemnation. It's like, well, brother so-and-so says that's, all the brethren are, well, that's I don't know, you may have to leave church with that kind of a disgusting habit. It's like, I'm just telling you, I used to have the problem. All the more reason we don't trust you. You may go back. I don't know what the mentality is, but it sort of has a bit of that flavor. Because it was funny, because I was talking about how when I received the Holy Spirit, how all those things departed from me. And or that thing in particular, and a few other things, drugs, alcohol. They didn't seem to mind the drugs and alcohol. As long as you're not doing drugs, everyone at church seems to be... They like the testimony of, I used to use drugs. I guess it's sort of what? What is it about it? A lot of them have never had the problem. Maybe that's it. You get into things that people might be secretly struggling with, or their husband might be secretly struggling with it. And I was surprised at the number of women who struggle with it. And it's just a problem for some people, but people don't want to talk about it because it's because it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's the reason why we use the bathroom in private. All that stuff's embarrassing, right? And I was just too happy to be embarrassed anymore. I was just like, I'm free. So now I'm going to talk about it. I don't care. But the people who still struggle with it had a big problem with me talking about it. They didn't like someone being all open about their problem that they also had, and that they were coming into church every Sunday in their nice church Sunday best, looking real snazzy and holy and righteous, and nodding their head as the pastor preached about how righteous things ought to be, and shaking their head in disgust in private with their friends about that new guy who was admitted to all those filthy things. All those filthy things. I mean, come on. It wasn't even like that, I know people have engaged in truly filthy things. So, I mean, whatever. So the point is, it's very dangerous, and because God doesn't like that. God doesn't like it when you're doing something, you're concealing it. Okay. Understandable. It's understandable that if you have a sin, you don't want to talk about it. It is better for you to confess your sins, or at least the general fact of it, and be open. You don't necessarily... It's sometimes good, depending on the nature of the sin, to talk to someone trusted, if you can find such a person, about your difficulty, struggle, whatever. It can be helpful. Accountability is often a helpful tool. Meaning having someone to sort of be that you have to be honest with, or that you're willing to be honest with. There's a lot of problems with that, right? I mean, it's like you just, if you're supposed to be honest with them and you want to succeed, there's still a danger you end up lying because you just don't want to disappoint them. But we have to find a way to be right, if righteousness is what indeed we want, and not to impress other people, we have to lay aside that kind of foolishness and be forthright in the things we talk about. So whatever, however you try to cope with those things is good, but it's understandable when people don't want to cope with it, when they just kind of are dealing with it on their own. They don't want to admit it because, for the very reasons I said, some things are embarrassing, and people who may also have the same struggle won't go forward and say, you know what, I've been struggling with the same problem. Like, they're not brave like that. You stick your neck out, and then people pile on with negativity and condemnation. It's a very sad commentary, but they do. They're going to pile on with, I'm just warning you ahead of time. Your fears are very likely to come true when you admit that embarrassing thing in front of the whole church. So don't do that. Don't admit it at your women's study group either, where there's like 10 people. You have to have one or two trusted friends you can admit, or sometimes one or two friendly strangers who are also believers. Meaning, the thing was, when I first confessed my sins, it was to the pastor and a couple of young men. And what's interesting to me is that I was a stranger at the church, right? It was only after I joined the church and I continued talking about these things that it became an issue. It didn't become an issue for a while, but then it became an issue. I mean, it didn't become an issue immediately because, and it wasn't an issue with the pastor or the guys who were there, but with other people who weren't there. It's the kind of thing they want to hear about, like, we had someone come in this morning and blah, 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 or this week there was a guy who came and you may remember you saw him, and then they never see me again. They're like, oh, that's a great story. Yeah. They nod their heads. But having someone just being around as a constant reminder, and also, of course, the suspicion, it's like, there's this also suspicious thing where people are like, I don't really think you have overcome it. You're just, they think you're lying. They never think you're making up the sin. They just think you're lying about overcoming it. You're probably still doing it. Like me, except your lies are worse because I'm just quiet about my sin. You are loudly trumpeting your righteousness, and that offends me. Yeah, I could see that. And I wasn't loudly trumpeting my righteousness, by the way. I was just talking about the thing itself, and etc. But it can feel like that. So we should not be harsher in our judgment towards others than we are on ourselves. If you spoke up in public about something embarrassing or shameful that you've done, how would you want others to receive you? How would you want that to be done? It goes to the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Same thing with judgment. And of course, there's also matters of conscience. Like where you're like something like let's say vaping, right? I'll use vaping because I used to smoke, but I quit, and I'm glad I quit before vaping because I'd probably be vaping. It seems like a less hazardous form. I know people say, oh, people are getting, people do crazy things with it and they're getting hurt and whatever, using high doses of whatever and getting sick. So I don't recommend it. I'm just saying I'd probably be doing it if I hadn't quit. But let's say someone who they say, oh, I use very light, I think I like it better than smoking. I feel healthier, etc., etc. Well, I leave that up to them. I'm not going to condemn someone over something. What? Now it's like, to me, at some point, I don't like anything that controls me. Now you could say, like, well, because I thought immediately, it's not much different than coffee, is it? It's just a mild stimulant. And I like coffee. But, doesn't coffee control you? Don't you have to have it every morning? Well, I like to have it every morning. I like to have breakfast every morning, too. But I know I can fast because I've done it. And I know I can quit coffee because I did it, and it wasn't hard. I was just like, I'll quit coffee for a while. Just like other things. And I'm like, if it's not controlling me, if I know I can quit it when I want, it's okay to miss something you like that's pleasurable, but I just don't like something to control me. Cigarettes, I knew that when I would stop smoking or try to stop smoking, I would lose my mind. And I knew this thing had a deep hold on me. So nicotine is a pretty strong attachment. So I do not recommend it. Do you ever even try it? If you have never tried it, don't even try it. It's just very addictive. And I certainly wouldn't want that on me, because but I'm not going to judge someone else who does, because it's such a minor thing. You know what I mean? It's like, and how they get hooked on it, and like, you know what I mean? Like, maybe it was a long time ago. It's not like they took it up. As a Christian, don't take it up. Or they took it up in their youth or some time when they were weak or whatever, as a way to relax or whatever. It's nothing like alcohol. Nothing like as destructive. Even cigarettes are less destructive than alcohol. Everyone knows that. But, I leave it to your conscience. I would never condemn someone for doing it. Don't recommend it. But that's a point of, like, I'm not gonna stand in judgment of my brother over that, lest there be other things. Maybe not the same thing. Maybe something similar. Something of a similarly conscience level decision. You know what I mean? And it can go like I can't find a good exact match for that, because I'm trying to think of something. Coffee's close. Like, I use coffee. If I were to condemn people over vaping, maybe they're close enough to where that's like, well, then why that? It is somewhat addictive. It's certainly addictive on a pleasure level. It's like, it's enjoyable. It's making me want to drink coffee now. Actually, I don't know. I think I just enjoy the flavor in the morning. Hot. I don't know. Strange thing. I remember trying as a kid thinking it was terrible. And it is quite terrible. I like it. The bitter flavor. I like bitter flavors. Anyways, so forgiven you shall be forgiven. That's a lot in a very short amount of time he's saying there. He tells a whole parable at some point about that, about how we ought to forgive. The one about the guy who owed his master a lot of money. He was very in debt to his master, and I believe, I'm not sure if it was a king or whatever, but I think it was a king. Perhaps he had him brought before him, his steward. Yeah, it was a steward, right? There was a certain king, and he had a steward, and the steward wasted his goods, or he owed him a great deal of money. I forget the exact setup. He owed him a lot of money. And the king said he was going to throw him in prison until he paid everything. Right? And then he begged for mercy, and the king forgave him. So, okay, he was moved with compassion for this man, and begged, and did not sell all. I think actually he might have not thrown him into prison. I think he was going to sell all he had and, sell off his stuff, and he was moved with pity. Whatever he was going to do, he was going to really make him pay. Like ruin his life, make him pay. And he let him off. And then, of course, the story goes that then he went to someone who owed him just a very small amount and grabbed him by the throat and said, "Pay me what you owe," and threw him in prison. And the king heard about it, and he was very angry. That's a good, forgiving you shall be forgiven, judge not that you shall not be judged. Not only if you're doing the same things, but I used to do them. That's another important thing. Like, also in terms of judgment, I want to say this is very important. There is also the aspect of judgment, which is condemnation in a sort of a global sense, a larger sense of like condemning them as you would an unbeliever or someone to whom the mist of darkness is reserved forever. You look at the Apostle Paul and you think, in early in his first appearances in the scripture, he is trying to persecute the church and throw Christians in prison and have them, then they may potentially face execution or God knows what, dragging them in chains to be tried in Jerusalem. Right? And you would look at that man and say, like, there's a son of the devil if I ever saw one. But then the Lord, touches his life and changes him, and and he becomes a different man, essentially. Now, I'm not the same man I once was. I've changed in many ways. When I was a young man, I was foolish. I did foolish things. I used drugs. I was, not only that, when I turned to the Lord, I immediately fell into false doctrine, right? I had false doctrine. Now, what if now that God has opened my eyes to a lot of things I thought were true, and I pray he yet opens my eyes the more, because I may not be perfect in my understanding of everything. In fact, I'm certain I'm not perfect in my understanding, but there may be things I think I understand that I don't, that I'm wrong about. I would hope not, but it very well could be true, and I'm blind to it. It must be blindness because it's not willful, like I know it's not true, but I just say it anyways. It's not like that at all. So, and I give, here's the thing, I give other people the same benefit of the doubt. And that's an important thing. People get into arguments with other Christians and they start saying, you have the wrong idea. Or they look at a young person and they say, you're on the road to hell. And they maybe you could say that in a loving way. The things you're doing are going to destroy you. The path you're on is a path of destruction. There's nothing wrong with saying that, because you're trying to get them to come off the path. But there can be a destructive way of speaking to people that is not meant to draw them off the path, not meant to, like I said, it goes to that tough love issue I've talked about fairly recently, where it's like, you don't want to, you think you're we'll excuse it as tough love, but we're really just being jerks. You don't want to be like that. You don't want to be, I'm using tough love, and being really, and actually behaving in a way that's much better described as selfish, let's say. It gives me pleasure to really let them have it. And who really care? And the things I'm saying are not really calculated to turn them to the truth in any way, shape, or form, except perhaps by shock of how rude and uncouth a Christian can be. And I've never known that particular testimony. I've never heard anyone say it's like, I was really turned to the Lord when I was talking to someone and they were exceedingly rude and uncouth in their argument. And it made such an impression on me that the next day I turned my heart to Jesus. And that's what, but that's almost like the way people act, as if this rude, uncouth behavior is going to somehow magically, they're going to see that I'm so willing to corrupt my words and to use cruelty and viciousness and personal attack. I'm so willing to corrupt the name of Christ for Christ's sake that people are going to say, of a truth, God is in you. Because how else could you be so willing to behave like such a hypocrite? Except for Jesus. I'll be a hypocrite for Jesus, but for no other. It's just this it's ridiculous. Who's going to really, But that people behave as if that is true. My hypocrisy will surely testify to them, It's like when I hear Christians using foul language. Not the way I would use it, by the way. And it's not that it was one of the things I want to talk about, judge not. Well, when I hear them using it the way I would use it, actually, because I would use it sometimes in a way that probably is not good, right? But I mean the way I would use it like in the study. Like I might just use the words to teach something. There's nothing, a lot of, like I said, there's profanity and all stuff. I don't want to get into excusing about it. But when people use profanity, There's different ways to use it. You know, you can use it in a way that's like punctuation. You know what I mean? Like, and in a sense, that can endear you to people, believe it or not. Because some people, like, if you're studiously always avoiding foul language, they think, oh, he's a prig. You know? I'm not even sure what that means. But whatever, I think that's the right word for that situation. You know? And so they think you're kind of like a little stuck up and a bit of a, you know, a dork maybe. You know, I'm not sure it's the exact word. You know, you're stuck up. You're kind of, I don't know the non-profane terminology to describe it. Right? And so playing along with them and using the word, the kind of speech they do can be endearing at least. I don't know if it's going to preach the gospel, you know. But here's one thing, though. Okay, so maybe you don't join in their foul language. But, like, it doesn't help your cause at all to, like, start waggling your finger at them. Because before I was a believer, I never thought twice about the words I used or the way I used them. But here's another one. When I first became a believer, when I got into arguments with other people, you know, when they made me angry, because someone sent me a link to this thing, and it was a famous Christian famous Christian apologist, an infamous Christian internet troll who would get into arguments with people in chat rooms, and he just really is not cut out for this because he's like, F you to people, and he swears all the time, but not in a gracious way, because there's a gracious way to use foul language. Just listen to me for your length of time, and occasionally you'll hear the words spoken, because I can say them, but it's like the way you use them. When you use them on another person, like, you're an effing idiot, you know, or something like that, but even if you say you're an idiot, that is really not good. And that's the way we need to avoid saying it. Especially, all right? Especially that way. But what I'm saying is if I go around, you know, when I'm frustrated, if I say nasty things to people, I have no right to then, when I'm not frustrated, when I'm just feeling all uppity, to go around to the guys, you know, working on the plumbing, who are having a tough time, and using some colorful adjectives to describe this particular pipe that won't turn. You know what I mean? Now this pipe has, you know, it's frustrating, right? So they start using colorful, profane adjectives and adverbs and all that, right? And to be like, no, you shouldn't talk like that, blah, 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 blah. It's like, that's the least form of that. You know, it's like, that's like it's so unnecessary. But people will chide people. It's like I said, when I because some people in my family know that I'm a fairly zealous Christian, the younger ones, when they use foul language in my presence, will apologize. And I've never told them to do this. And I always tell them, don't do that. Please. Don't do that. Don't apologize. Especially because it's not like, now, if they said, like, to somebody else, you know, if they were profane, you know, like if they're profane and demeaning and cruel and all those things towards other people, I take it a lot different than if they say, the other day I was going on and my effing car was giving me such an effing time and blah, blah. You know, it doesn't even mean anything. So don't be judgmental of people. Plus, they aren't where you are. Christian or not, you know, I try not to condemn people who talk the way I used to talk, either with foul language or even just being mean in their, like you're arguing with people and like, I think you're stupid. You know, it's not a very good argument. It's just meant to try to make the other person feel bad. I used to do that. I used to want to make people feel bad because they were making me feel bad. They'd say nasty things to me, and I wanted to say nasty things back to them. But it is ultimately, I always found that taking a superior road not only is it is in some ways even worse, but in a righteous way. Meaning you heap coals of fire on their head by being non-judgmental, non-condemnatory, and being forgiving about things. By being the better person, you always come out on top. That's 35 minutes in the study, but that is a very important group of concepts. Judgment, condemnation, forgiveness. Given it shall be given unto you. We read this, right? Good measure, pressed down and shaken together. What's that mean? Well, you can fill up something and just go whoosh. There's a lot of air, right? But good measure means, one of the things the Lord hates is unjust weight imbalances and measures. Like you get out a cup and you say, this is a farthing or whatever. I don't. This is let's just use our money. This is a 8-ounce cup. How many ounces of whatever this is would you like? 16 ounces. Okay, a pound. 1, 2. But maybe the cup is actually 7 ounces. And so they're not actually, it says 8 on it, but, don't believe everything you read. Right? It's actually 7 ounces. It's not a good measure. It's not a proper measure. You're not getting what you're supposed to be getting. Right? Not only that, he puts it in there with a flourish to get as much air as he can in there. So it seems like more. You know what I mean? Or that would be more in a case of like, here's our 16-ounce bag. When we fill it to the top, it's 16 ounces. Here we go. And it's like, and it's just all fluff in there. You ever get something where you buy it, a container of something, and you look down, and it's like only half full? I was wondering, why do they make the containers so big when they only fill them halfway? So you believe you're getting more. But also, a lot of times, some stuff, like I buy a particular kind of powder to add to a morning drink I have. And, it's all, every time I open it, it's a half. But the thing is, when they filled it at the factory, it might have been that it was fluffier and it settled. Right? But the weight is right. It's 16 ounces, and that's fine. Because we have a lot of... The nice thing is, in our culture, we don't get this a lot because everything's standardized. The scales are all checked by the state. You go to the gas station, you ever notice that little sticker? Inspected by the state of, in my case, Illinois. It's inspected by the state. The state comes in, and they have a Department of Weights and Measures, and they check that stuff. Make sure when you pump a gallon, it's a gallon. It better be. Because they can face hefty fines if they go tinkering with the weights and measures. It's very important, You're not allowed to put your thumb on the scale, as they say. Put your thumb on the scale. That stuff, those analogies used to make sense when the butcher owned his own butcher shop and stuff. It's like, but why would they do that at Walmart? If anything, it usually gets reversed, You go to a big box store, and the butcher's working there for hourly wages. And, you develop a friendly relationship with him, he's more likely to give you a little extra. Because that's the nature of things. It's like they don't own it. They have no stake in it. And, there's always a fluctuation of, whatever. I don't know. I mean, they probably count everything and the weight and all that. They notice shortages. With the computer age, it's harder and harder for that kind of stuff to go on. But there's always a certain amount of wastage that gets, they track it, but it's like, as long as it's not too much, it's what's expected. Anyways, good measure. It's got to be good measure. Press down. I mean, fill that bag. Instead of taking just the bag at the, they press it down. Push it in there, and let's keep filling it. Push it down, press it down, shake it down, shake it up a bit so it can settle down in there. Fill it up and good. Good measure. Press down, shaking together. Make everything, like you can, sometimes you tumble stuff if you have things that are odd shaped, right? You put them in there and they fill up the container, but like if you shake it a bit, you can make more room. If they're bulky, kind of, depending on what it is. I mean, anything from certain kinds of Like I said, like that powder. Powder, when it first gets put into something, it can be kind of fluffy, but you could shake it a bit and press it down, and it'll compact. And what he's saying is, if you do as God asks, if you are generous to the degree He wants, what He's saying is, it's going to come back to you in an abundance, good measure, pressed down, shaken. Like someone who wants to just, I want you to take as much as you can carry. You know what I mean? As opposed to just what you've got coming. And when your bag is pressed down, shaken together, it's not someone who's concerned with giving you merely what is the agreed upon fair amount. It is giving you more, all that you can take. All that you can take in this container. It's like those sales, like a sale where they say, like, everything you can fit in this bag is 15% off. Everything you can fit in there. So you want to, if you, like, let's say if you want to take full advantage of that, you have a bunch of stuff you wanted to buy that's been put off, you're going to try to see how you can fit everything in there as perfectly as possible. It's the same thing. It's like, get it all in there. That's the mentality of get as much in. And that's just saying the Lord is going to bless you like that. Bless you as much as you can handle. It's not necessarily, not necessarily monetarily, by the way, but, I'm not saying like this is so there's some teachers who will, who teach the prosperity gospel, who will sit on something like this and they'll say, this is how it works with money. If you give away all your money, you're just going to get rich. That's not how it works. It's not the point to just, you may give money but get other things. You may give other things and get money. I don't know. It's going to be what is most needful to you. Like I said, I would not be so, don't risk necessarily, your family's basic needs on an experiment where you think, like, let's see if I can, test the Lord. Because in some level, it becomes like tempting the Lord when you're like not giving of what you have to give, but rather trying to treat it like trying to treat God like He's some sort of machine, where if I do this, He's obligated to do that. God is not obligated to do anything. He has no obligation to us. And here it's interesting, it says, shall men give into your bosom? Now you say, well, why are you saying God? Well, men will give into your bosom, but who is moving them but God? Ultimately, God makes things the way they are so that if you should give, you would receive. Given it shall be given unto you. You shouldn't necessarily give to get, though. Isn't that what He already said? Give hoping to receive nothing in return. That's part of the bargain. It gives and it shall be given unto you. Shall men give into your bosom. Overflowing things. Not necessarily money or goods, but it might be love, respect. It might be other things, maybe not tangibly valuable. And if all you're thinking about money, you might be disappointed at the things you get for what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, and that's something we need to deal with, is we need to stop having our minds only on money, because the reason people think about money is because we have covetous hearts and we want things. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not really the point. The point is not to make you rich. It's to make you the child of God. And to be the child of God is not about man's life consists not in the abundance of the possessions he has. It's from the Lord. That's not how our life. That's not what makes up our life. For with the same measure you meet, withal shall be measured to you again. Meaning, when you be generous, and you'll receive generosity. Forgive, and you shall be forgiven. And this is the concept of what he's saying. It's like, do unto others as you would have done unto you. The Lord will see to it that you receive a just recompense for what you do. You know, it's like, it may not, you know, but you have to also submit yourself to God and accept that your idea of what that ought to be may not be the same as what God's idea of what that ought to be. You know, I would like, you know, I mean, who wouldn't like to have a lot of money? You know, at first blush, anyways, you think, I'd like to have a lot of money. But if you have a lot of money, you have a lot of responsibility. And it's something that, you know, that destroys men. A lot of people, when they get a lot of money, it ruins their life. It ruins their life. You know? You know, and sometimes you think like, hey, you know, well, let's take on that challenge. You know, I'd like to see what that's like. Would it ruin my life? I don't know. You know, you know, and it depends on what also your concept of a lot of money is. To me, it's like, I don't actually want, I just want to make enough to survive, and that my children would prosper and be able to have homes and families of their own. That's really all I'm looking for. You know, I don't have a lot of needs. You know, there's things I'd like to do, but most of the things I'd like to do involve, I just want some, you know, like, I have things I want to build. You know, I'd like to, my house could use we don't have enough bathrooms for the amount of people who live here. It'd be nice to add a little something to the house, right? I get that idea. But it's like, that's not exactly, that's like a one-time thing. It's not a lot of money, since I'd be planning to do all the work myself. I don't know, you know, what, I just want to pay my bills. You know, I find that fine. It's like, I do genuinely value the gifts of God. Like, if I had money, I would want to trade it for righteousness. I would want to trade it for contentment that I have. I already have riches. I'm an exceedingly wealthy man. Not in money, but I mean, it's like, I have a wife that loves me, children that obey me, you know? And I have other family members too that love me. I'm very wealthy in the people I have around me, and in the gifts God has given me. If I think about my discontent in life, it's mostly just I wish I always knew which direction I should be going, and what I should be doing in each moment. Like, I wish God had a angel come down with a daily schedule, weekly schedule, whatever. Just tell me what I should be doing, what should be where I should put my priorities, because it's often very confusing for me, because there's so much I could be doing, so much to do. But as far as money, it's like, if I can pay my bills, that's fine. So I don't know. When I hear about these things, it's like, men give unto my bosom. For the things I've given of myself, I've seen men give to me, but it's like, some money, yes, people have given me money. You know, some people insist, and it's like, and I'm thankful. But not particularly, I mean, a few particularly, but not, I mean, not like this consistent, you know, stream of cash or something like that. And that's not what I'm looking for. Though, like, you know, like I said, it's like, sometimes you think like, well, should I be doing this full-time ministry? I don't know. But, you know, I've earned the respect of some people. There are people who respect me. People who count themselves my friends. They're friendly to, you know, I have goodwill I've received from people for my giving of myself to things. You know, it's like, people have goodwill back towards me. You know what I mean? Like, there's a willingness to do things for me that I find through my willingness to do things for others. You know? And that can be more valuable than money. Because it has something, there's something more fulfilling about having a friend who will help you than being able to hire somebody who will come and do the work for money or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, having the money to deal with every problem is, it's not something to be just completely dismissed as a value in life. Because some things can't be bought with anything except money. And we have to have a certain amount. But I want you to not just think about money when you think about these things. We can go through this next part with 10 minutes to go. But that was well worth taking time to go through those verses, in my opinion, you know? Because, like, you know, the way I look at it is like your normal pastor will preach on a Sunday. They'll pick 2 verses like that, and they'll preach for an hour. I remember Arnold Murray used to talk about, he was my original teacher, who I regard as a false teacher in many ways. That's not to say I disagree with everything he said, because even a broken clock is right twice a day. Yeah, I mean, there's always something to agree about, of course. I agree with him that Jesus was the Son of God. Yes. Yes, indeed. I do agree with that. But anyways, I lost my track. There was a thump upstairs, and it makes me lose. Every time that happens, I think, is my stream messed up? But I don't think so. That would come with a phone call. I'm going to have a sip of coffee. It's funny how quickly my brain wiped when I heard the thump upstairs. It's literally like, gone. I can't remember what I was thinking. I can't remember what I was saying, and you all remember. That's the weird part. That's the part. You're like, Paul, you were just saying that, whatever you were saying. Or maybe I didn't quite say what I was about to say. It's all right. There's always something. It's been probably something I said before or something I will say again. And it'll probably come to me in a minute anyways. Let's just go on to the next part, huh? And he spake a parable unto them. Can the blind lead the blind? Shall they not both fall into the ditch? The disciple is not above his master. I'm just going to check the time real quick. Oh, I was at 50. I'll go back and look at that and see if I can remember what I was talking about. And maybe mention it tomorrow if it's worth it. So, he spake a parable unto them. Can the blind lead the blind? Shall they not both fall into the ditch? The disciple is not above his master, but everyone that is perfect shall be as his master. That's making me think. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but perceivest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Either how canst thou say to thy brother, Brother, let me pull out the mote that is in thine eye, when thou thyself beholdest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, cast off first the beam out of thine own eye, then thou shalt see clearly to pull out the mote that is in thy brother's eye. I remember now what I was talking about. For a good tree bringeth not forth corrupt fruit, neither doth a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. For every tree is known by his own fruit. For if thorn... It goes on. I feel like I can't stop reading at that point. So, let's just start here and we'll probably have to... One of the things I was thinking about saying was about, like I said, we take, and this is an important point. It's not an important point here, but whatever. It's worth mentioning. I think it's worth mentioning because sometimes this is only for my own sake. Because sometimes I think I go so long and it's just a little bit of scripture. Am I just blowing wind? Even now, I'm off topic. But, you know, Arnold Murray used to criticize them that they just take 1 or 2 verses and they spew off for an hour. You know, and I didn't like the way... At the time, I thought, yeah, you should have lots of verses. But the thing is, the verses, you know, when you talk about them, you could characterize it as spewing off, or you could characterize it as adorning it. Adorning the word with further exposition. Arnold Murray himself would sit there and talk about particular verses. Some verses he'd breeze over like there was nothing to say. You know what I mean? I remember when someone who used to listen to me, I don't know if he still does, he probably does occasionally. I know he does occasionally, like if I do an interesting special, right? A young guy used to listen to me. I remember he told me one time he had a question about a particular verse, and he went back and listened to my teaching on it, And I had just kind of breezed over it without saying a thing. And for me, I was a little horrified. You know what I mean? I'm like, I knew I could do that. I mean, that just happens, right? Especially because the way I used to do studies was I would do a chapter at a time. So I would sit down for a half hour, an hour, or 3 hours and do one chapter. And I did enjoy that. And then I would go and edit that down in case I had moments where I thought I lost the train of thought or I just went silent for a while. And it was nice to be able to do that. On this format, though, I don't get any choice. I just, whatever happens, happens. And if it's terrible, it's terrible. There's nothing I can do about it. The point is just to do it. And by no means, don't think that I expect everyone to listen to every single thing that's here. But also, if like some part of the study seems long and boring and the verses aren't that interesting, like you read the verse and you're like, what he's going to talk about today, I don't know, but I think I'd rather hear him talk about this and going to the part you want to hear about, that's fine. You know what I mean? It's like, that certainly won't offend me. But a lot of preachers will spend just hours on 1 or 2 verses once a week. The thing is, we're going over them consecutively on a daily basis and stringing them together and making sure our understanding of each part is connected to what came before. And I do think that's valuable. And I do think that even though I may go off on, and again, you say, Paul, who we are arguing with, it's me, because I wonder about these things. I'm saying, was this a bad study sometimes? There were some studies early in Luke where I felt like it went on. And even now, I know I'm doing that again. I'm making a talk that may not be interesting to you, but it is an important thing to me. And as far as I think about it, I want to make them valuable. I do like the old format because I felt like it was jam-packed. And those are still available. I do want to go back to doing studies like that. It's just it was getting so difficult, and with scheduling and stuff, the best thing to do was just get up in the morning and do a study that I couldn't edit. And so there'd be no temptation to put it off. Because sometimes I'd record a study and would sit on my computer for 2 weeks. Just sit there, waiting for me to edit it, put it together into an actual study. Can the blind lead the blind? Shall they not both fall in the ditch? The very obvious thought, right? If I can't see, how can I lead you? If I can't see, and it goes into that beam and mote in your eye, that brother's eye thing. And we're probably going to have to cover this tomorrow. We only got 3 minutes. Can we really do this concept in 3 minutes? I think 15 should be the most, but that would be if I was a really good teacher instead of just a barely competent one. Because then I could just string together the perfect group of sentences that would completely illuminate everything that's being said here. Our leaders have to see. We have to, not only that, we kind of have to believe they can see. And we have to be right about it. People who study with me think Paul has some insight to the scripture that I want to take on. It's like I can tell, I listen to him and he talks about stuff and I can tell he's familiar with things and he kind of knows what he's talking about. At least as far as my judgment goes, because I don't know the Bible. I want to know the Bible. That's where I was when I was young. I wanted to understand the scriptures. And poor Arnold Murray, I met the man. He seemed like a really nice guy. Other people had I've talked to people who've had bad experiences with him. And he certainly had a sort of a nasty side. If you watch him any time, he had a sharp side. Let's put it that way. Let's not call it nasty. Let's say he could be kind of sharp, couldn't he? Come on. Even people who still love him, gotta admit, the guy had a sharp tongue sometimes, right? He had a few choice words. That's why you liked him. That's why I liked him. I liked that he was taking on people and talking tough. It was kind of reassuring. I saw a lot of preachers as being kind of soft and effeminate, and I didn't like it. It was unappealing to have, but honestly, sometimes it's a bit too much with the machismo. I'm a big old Marine sergeant and blah blah boo, and bragging on all you've done, and that kind of stuff. Poor Arnold Murray, but I remember people have said, but he, the one who taught you at first. Well, my dad taught me at first, and I read the Bible on my own, but I needed help. When I needed help, there was Arnold Murray. But it was kind of like, some people go to the, they teach. I never taught my kids to swim. They all learned to swim apart from me. I remember helping one of them maybe with some swimming. And but I remember I had a family member who was of the mindset that you just take the kid, you throw them into the deep end, and then they learn to swim or die. I guess I don't. It's like it's sink or swim, kid. Ah! And I said that's kind of how I learned the Bible. I just got kind of thrown in. Except when I was thrown into the deep end, there was an old man named Arnold there trying to drag me under. That's how I like to make that story. And it's kind of mean to him in a sense because I don't appreciate a lot of what he had to say. I think he did a lot of harm. But, I also look at I don't thank him for it. Okay? That's what I think upsets people is I'm not gracious towards him for it. But I look at it the same way as having an abusive bully, hey, look at, when I was in 4th grade, there were these bullies that attacked me. And they threw me on the ground. They tried to tie me up with a jump rope and throw me a creek. That's a true story. And I kicked and punched my way out. And I turned my back and I kind of walked away. And then one of them punched me in the face from behind. Right? They never saw my tears, which I was a little proud of. Right? But that incident was soon after I decided I wanted to join the football team. I wanted to join, the association that puts you on a football team. I wanted to join football as a, elementary school kid. And then it kind of changed my life because I had, prior to that, my identity was I'm really smart. And it became, I'm an athlete. I'm a football player. It made me feel more competent and strong and formidable and all that. And I could say, but I don't thank the kid who punched me in the face. I thank God for all the trials in my life. But the one who actually did it, I'm not, it says it's impossible, but that offenses shall come, Jesus said. But woe to them by whom they come. We don't thank Judas. Thank you, Judas, for betraying Jesus. Because without your betrayal, where would we be? Where would we be without Judas's betrayal? Betraying the Lord. Why? And so in like manner, I am no more thankful to the guy who led me. And even though I think all the things he taught sincerely. He really believed it was true, I think. For the most part. I don't know. I feel like his conscience didn't bug him at all a little bit about some of the things like the predicting the end of the world in 1981 and all that. Didn't bother you? Or didn't like to talk about it? I have things I don't like to talk about, things I'm ashamed of too, so I appreciate that, But on the other hand, a little forthrightness. I've said things about him, and I expect to be judged on the same basis. That's why I talk like this, because how we lead people is very important. People put their trust in teachers, They do. Arnold Murray used to say, "Don't trust me," which is what the con man says. He said don't trust him. Only a trustworthy person would say, "Don't trust me." And so they put their trust in him. Don't trust me or this man or any other man without checking them out in God's word. And I'll show you how to check them out and where to check them out and exactly the things to check them out and what to think about the things you check out so that you will know that I'm right. It's all way too self-serving. The point of being a teacher is to serve others, not to be served. Not to make a name for yourself, but to exalt the name of Christ. right? And people who don't see properly are not fit to lead. There are too many people. I've used stories where I know of, pastors' sons who become pastors, and they got no business becoming a pastor. And maybe their dad had no business being a pastor, but they are. And they're ordained by the organization because they went through and they passed the test. I didn't pass any test. And it's like, it ain't, it's like, I get my authority because God touched me. Yeah? That's where I take my authority from. And you know what? Judge me. I don't care. I do care, actually. I care quite a bit. But I care mostly in the sense that it be right. I want justice. Anyways. So we'll continue in this with the disciples not above his master, because though 39 is connected to 41 and all that, and now we're over 5 minutes. Went on too far. Anyways, thanks for joining us today. We'll pick it up with 40, and we won't have to go over 39 again, because we're going to go over it in 41 again. So we're going to start with verse 40 tomorrow. Thanks for joining the study. We'll look forward to that tomorrow. Behind the doors and the posts hast thou set up thy remembrance, for thou hast discovered thyself to another than me, and art gone up, thou hast enlarged thy bed, made thee a covenant with